source software, it is a fantastic thing to have. We get to build off the shoulders of giants to create our own games, editors, and more. And for the most part, these softwares are made possible by a huge mountain of volunteer efforts made by people who are truly passionate about seeing game developers or even just modding hobbyists succeed. But like everything on the internet these days, it's been infected by the digital asbestos that is generative AI. But why? I can't lie to you guys, it's part of the reason why I've stopped really working much towards game dev these days. It's because I've come to the conclusion that I can't trust that the open source engines or editors that have been reliable tools in the past are still reliable, because they seem to have all been infected by AI-generated code to some degree. What I didn't expect, however, is that 3 of these cases in the last couple of weeks have hit communities and development stuff I care about, and 2 of those were within 24 hours of each other. And also right after the news that Unreal Engine 6 would be an AI slop fest as well. Now, before someone comes in and goes, well, build your own engine, absolutely the hell not. You can go away now. I know quite a few people who are doing just this sort of thing, and trust me, this is not feasible advice in a world where making your own game is a hard enough project without having to reinvent the wheel to get there. It's also not a relevant point when all of these projects got on fine without Gen AI in the past. Not everyone can be a coder, myself least of all, and if you are positioning yourself as an expert on the project, it should be trivial to do the work, right? Now, before I name the projects involved, I would like to remind everyone not to harass the developers involved in them. Please, we don't need more drama than we already have. So, what are these pieces of software that I'm referencing? The first is Ren'Py, which is a Python-based visual novel engine. You probably would know it best from games like Doki Doki Literature Club. The lead developer has stated on their Blue Sky that they have been using several LLMs, including GitHub Copilot Beta, in some form since 2021 to help them code, and I'll read the whole thing out. I use language models to develop Ren'Py and have since GitHub Copilot came out in beta in 2021. Before that, I've used other tools, code completion, etc. I don't vibe code Ren'Py though. That's not something you do if you want a project you can maintain. The difference is basically making sure that you have a complete understanding of what's going into your project. That's the difference between using efficiency tools that are beneficial and winding up with a code base you don't understand and can't support. There have been some misconceptions about Ren'Py being vibe coded, and I just want to get out in front of them. And I'll just say it now, code completion is not the same as generative AI, never has been, never will be. Trench Broom, which has been the premier Quake level editor for quite some time and has been used in several other ways, including as a level editing pipeline for Godot, was found to have contained generative AI as of at least March 2026, thanks to the agent's file being added then. Some further digging from Robert Yang suggests the last AI-free version was v2025.4. And Christian Dusk responded, "Oh my god, get over yourselves. First of all, let's talk about who supports who here. I have been working on TB nonstop for 16 years, and you get to use it for free. Let's be clear, you did nothing, while I and a few contributors did all the work. And secondly, AI allows me to add more features and fix more bugs in the limited time that I have. But rest assured that no code is added to TB without a proper review by me. AI is treated like any other contributor. And third of all, remember that you don't have to use TB at all. I certainly don't care because I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because I enjoy programming and learning so much. I'm happy about every user regardless, but don't come here and act entitled." Godot has also been found to contain Gen AI code since at least 4.7. Unreal quadrupling down on AI? Well, if you're considering Godot, keep in mind that the last version that was not made with AI contributions was 4.5. You can perhaps extend some courtesy to 4.6, but 4.7 openly includes AI-generated code and LLM-assisted changes. Do with this info what you will. Godot has since made a statement saying they will allow some AI-generated code in as long as it is properly disclosed. And this is from Remy Verchel. "I see some concerns raised about Godot's policy on contributions using AI. TLDR, Godot isn't vibe-coded. As a whole, the Godot Foundation and maintainers are fairly critical of AI usage and don't make nor accept vibe-coded contributions. Godot also doesn't include any AI features nor intends to add any. Our policy tolerates some AI assistance in the contribution process. Some is load-bearing, debugging, searching for information, surgical changes to existing code. I know it's already crossing the line for a number of people for valid reasons, and I fully respect that position. The above policy leaves some room for interpretation, so maintainers often discuss internally how to deal with a given AI-assisted PR. We've been working on a more detailed AI policy for some time, which will be published soon. It's a bit more restrictive, but not strictly a blanket ban. I want to dispel the misconception that Godot is now full of slop. Any slop PR is automatically rejected, simple as that. All other PRs are submitted by humans who are expected to take responsibility over the code they submit, and they undergo a PR review by expert maintainers to ensure quality. They need to understand it, test it, be confident in the implementation, and be willing to help maintain it if it's merged. Likewise, they need to be able to assert copyright over it. That precludes any substantial vibe coding. If a PR has an AI disclosure or signs of undisclosed AI usage, it gets scrutinized more as we automatically trust it less, especially from new contributors. In practice, we've merged circa 47 PRs with AI disclosures out of 3,700 in the past 2 release cycles, so 1.27%. A couple were mine, mostly meant as experiments to better understand the technology we're forced to contend with and its rapid evolution. I'm well aware that AI is a sensitive topic, and for some of you that may be upsetting to learn that Godot even tolerates some of it. I believe we have a fairly pragmatic stance that keeps AI at arm's length, based on our experience maintaining Godot for 12 years. I know that won't satisfy everyone. Yeah, it's a lot of open source and freely available software that's fallen on the slop hole, and none of that is by accident, but rather conscious choices by the leadership of these projects to include unethical tools in these projects. I think what's crazier to me about this trend of stuff happening is that at the very least, Trenchbroom and Godot have communities that overlap with the Doom community quite a bit. And what happened in the Doom community a few months back regarding an open source project and AI generated code pushed by the front-facing member of that project? Why, yes, that's right. Jeezy Doom forked under Like, what did they think would happen? Now that Yeezy Doom exists, everyone would just forget that the whole debacle happened and they'd be able to do this kind of slop pushing without pushback. While it feels like that Yeezy Doom thing was a lifetime ago, it was only October of last year. I know people on the internet tend to have fairly short memory spans these days, but if you know anything about these modding communities, you'll know that our memories, and especially grudges, can last a lifetime. So why risk the communities you've spent years, in some cases decades, building, just to completely abandon their trust for a quick bug fix? I think it's because these devs have been, quite bluntly, doing this shit for far too long. They've become resentful that they've become a maintainer for a project that won't make them rich, on the hook possibly for life, and they just don't have the energy for it anymore. In the case of Trenchbroom, for example, 16 years is a long time to maintain a project. Hell, most people don't even keep jobs that long, and while I don't know Christian, it's pretty likely he's maintaining Trenchbroom on top of, working a regular job. This stuff is hard, and while he has help, someone still has to maintain the main codebase, review pushes and pulls, so on and so forth. It's a big job, and doing it for over a decade is a commendable effort. But at some point, if you find yourself resenting having to do this work the right way, for example, in a way that won't violate the license of the project, it's probably best to do one of two things. Either pass the reins to another maintainer who can do the work, or you can stop maintaining the editor altogether. It's entirely likely that someone will want to continue your work and fork it regardless. I think it's probably also hard being the maintainer for the thing that makes games happen, but isn't always put front and center the same way that, say, an artist or a musician or a writer is. Because, let's face it, engines aren't sexy. It's physics and optimization and maths and syntax. It's still an art form, but it's severely underappreciated. It works best when it isn't noticed at all, when a player can be fully immersed in the game's world, or in the case of an editor, when a creator can make their thing without hindrance, when the tools just do the thing they're expected to do. Now, the number one piece of pushback I see in regards to the pushback about these tools being allowed is, well, you can't know for sure anyway, people aren't honest about it. And that's my point exactly. In the case of Godot, I had a discussion, and in it, I compared Gen AI use to drug and alcohol addiction. If you know anything about how drugs, alcohol, or even gambling can become addictive, it almost always begins with, I know my limits, and can very quickly spiral if it's hitting a pleasure center in your brain that you can't find a good substitute for. Gen AI essentially works the same way gambling does. You get a good output after loads of inputs, and it hits that dopamine center in your brain. The reason I point this out is that even if people believe they were being 100% honest about how much AI they're using, there's a good chance that they're not being honest because of the way that these programs function and what they do to your brain. So, while it is important to trust but verify, I argue it becomes much harder to verify once you start allowing even a little bit of Gen AI into your submissions. Because instead of verifying Gen AI or not, you're now verifying how much AI, what kind of AI, is the codebase used going to conflict with our license? Is this person being honest about how much AI they're using? And I'm sure there's more than I'm not thinking of right now. The license and copyright thing is the thing I really care about, even more so than the quality or amount of Gen AI code that exists in these projects. Indies already have a hard time dealing with any legal liabilities that may arise from their game development, and it could be unrelated to Gen AI, things like contractors, asset disputes, etc. Or if they're dealing with the public, if they have any legal liabilities that arise from that. How fair is it to subject them to even more potential legal scrutiny because you're too tired to fight against the tide of slop? Most LLM codebases scrape content illegally, and God knows what kind of licenses that codebase is now subjected to as a result. Why take the risk? Essentially, if Foss makes a solid decision that they can't allow Gen AI content into codebases using licenses like GPL or MIT, not only is the original project subject to scrutiny, but any project using that engine that hadn't forked off before Gen AI content had entered the codebase. We already have a hard enough time with GPL version 3 not allowing our UZDoom projects to be on consoles or use certain Steam APIs like cloud saves or achievements. Imagine the shitstorm we'd run into if UZDoom suddenly started allowing code that was scraped from Unreal or Unity projects. This is also ignoring the fact that, unlike what Ren'Py seems to think, if your code includes really anything Gen AI, you can't assert copyright over it. I would be curious to know what his threshold would be, but this is basically a mutually exclusive concept with the allowance of Gen AI code at any level. This may also mess with the status of the MIT license that Godot currently operates under, i.e., if any GPL v3 code is introduced into the codebase. It will infect the project, essentially, and it will either need to be removed or the license changed, and that's a big deal. Honestly, so many of our problems as UZDoom devs stem from the restrictiveness of the GPL license and how adamant that it remain copyleft. Imagine now subjecting everyone who uses Godot, or Ren'Py for that matter, to that kind of license. It'd be chaos. Unfortunately, however, we do live in the era of we're just little guys and everyone is 12, so I doubt there will be any real consequences for any of this, but I just wanted to give everyone some quick heads up about the open source projects that I know matter in my community, and it's not completely hopeless. The beauty about open source is that you can fork it under a... In fact, it's already happening with Trenchbroom, and there's some alternatives to Ren'Py, although I can't verify how good they are. And as far as Godot, there's at least a version somewhere in its 12-year history that won't have Gen AI in it. It's frustrating to start over, but there is a starting point. And yeah, that's it for now. I've been working on a couple other videos. I didn't want to make another one yelling about Gen AI, but this felt too important to not do, so thanks everybody for watching, and hopefully next video will actually be about Doom. You know, the thing I started my channel with, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!